Check audio. Check 1, 2.
Good morning. This is Councillor Brar checking in.
Good morning, Councillor Brar. You're coming in loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's Councillor Keenan just checking in.
Thank you, Councillor Keenan.
You chairing the first section?
I'm going to chair probably most of it because not a lot of people are here.
At some point, I got to step out to just,
Just quick,
for
what
the
time?
50th anniversary of Field Boys.
No.
Yeah,
No.
you have to speak.
Did you talk to this?
That's ridiculous.
Did you talk to the 30 mayor, or you guys just happened to do the
What?
letter? 30.
Oh, no, I spoke to her.
Sorry, guys. I can hear some conversation. I just don't know what you guys are saying.
Welcome, everybody, to Committee of Council. As we begin today's meeting, we'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the treaty territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and before them, the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. We also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and global Indigenous people that now call Brampton their home. We are honored to live, work, and play on this land. I would like to start by roll call. Mayor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Santos? Still on other municipal business? Yes, okay. Councillor Vincente?
Present.
Councillor Brar?
Present.
Councillor Keenan?
Present.
Councillor Medeiros?
Present.
Councillor Fortini,
Present.
Councillor Power, Councillor Tour,
Present.
Deputy Mayor.
Present.
We are at the approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to add, remove, delete, change anything on the agenda today? Councillor Vincente.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair. Wanted to add a delegation on behalf of the Drew family by Chris Drew, who is present here in Chambers.
We have that already.
Okay?
Yes.
And I would also like to ask that we rearrange the order of the meeting to allow for the presentation to be delivered.
Presentation first and then delegations? Thumbs up? Good. Very good. Councillor Vincente, you move that. Nobody else on the board to add anything? All in favor? That carries. Declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Are there any members that would like to declare a conflict of interest on anything in the agenda today? Seeing none, none online. Move to consent. As part of the consent process, I will read each agenda item that is subject to a consent motion. Any member may verbally identify the item to be held for debate during the meeting. Any item not held for debate will be considered as part of the consent motion and voted on for approval. Our first item is 8.2.1, staff report, request to begin procurement, design, supply, and installation of park shade shelters, playgrounds, outdoor sport amenities at various locations citywide. Consent. Staff item 11.2.1, staff report, purchasing and activity quarterly report, third quarter 2023. Consent. Item 11.2.2, staff report, active consulting services contract, third quarter 2023. Consent. Item 11.2.3, staff report, delegation of regional tax ratio settings, 2024. Consent. 11.2.4, staff report, important and commemorative dates, 2024. Consent. 11.3.1, minutes, accessibility advisory
Sorry,
committee,
I'm
November 28th, 2023. Consent. Deputy Mayor.
Dates, I just noticed a spelling error. So I don't want to hold the report just for the spelling error, so I'll just email staff, or should I? Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, please send an email.
Okay,
Perfect.
I'll send it to you. Thank you.
Item 11.4.1, correspondence from Tamara Chipperfield, Credit Valley Conservation dated January 4th, 2024. Notice of meeting to approve the appointment to participating municipalities, 2024. I don't want to hold that, but I'm just advising everybody that I'll be running for chair of the CVC this coming Friday. Thank you very much. Consent. 12.1.1, staff presentation. Item 12.2.1, light rail transit LRT extension study, advanced TPAP stage RM. We're holding those for delegations. 12.2.1, the light rail extension study, advanced TPAP stage will also be held for delegation. 12.3.1, minutes, Environment Advisory Committee, December 5th. Hold. 13.1, referred matters list, fourth quarter update, 2023. Hold. The clerk will summarize the items held by members for consideration or not part of the consent motion.
Through you, Chair, we are holding item 12.3.1, the minutes of the Environment Advisory Committee for December 5th, held by yourself, and also holding 13.1, the referred matters list, also held by yourself, Chair Paleshi.
Perfect. Deputy Mayor Singh will move the consent motion. All in favor? That carries. We'll move right into there are no announcements. We have public delegations. We'll go to the first public delegation, item 6.1, delegation for Soheb Hanif Realtor, purchase or lease of city property located at 52 Bramley Road, Ward 7. Do we have Mr. Hanif online?
Through the chair, I don't believe Mr. Hanif is online at this moment.
Okay,
I don't see him in
Let's-
the audience either.
let's stand it down for now, and come back to it.
Okay.
Is that okay with committee? Perfect. Let's go to our staff presentation then, 12.1.1, the staff report presentation by Mr. Doug Reeder, Director, Transit Development, Brampton Transit. Welcome, sir.
Good morning. Mr. Mayor, Member of Council, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. We're here to provide you with an update on the LRT extension study and to recommend that we take one of the alignments through the TPAP stage. This is an important milestone in the project as it's the last stage of the planning process, after which we can be considered shovel-ready for an applicable funding program. Next slide, please. So there's been a lot of work that's been done on this study over the last 5 years. After narrowing down a long list of options, we had a short list of options, we narrowed that down further to two alignments, one surface and one tunnel option that was narrowed down in mid-2021, with council unanimously supporting the tunnel option as the preferred alignment to advance funding advocacy. At the direction of council at that time, the team then developed a 30% design and the draft environmental project reports for both of those alignments, the results of which were presented through a workshop at council last February. Next slide, please. Last May, staff presented the results of this workshop to council, and at that time, council recommended that we have some further dialogue with Metrolinx and provincial officials on the study with a focus on the tunnel alignment. Staff are also directed to continue our engagement with the federal and provincial governments from an advocacy perspective to get funding for the LRT extension. Next slide, please. So Metrolinx has been involved in the LRT extension studies since the beginning. They've had provided detailed comments on the project throughout, and as well as detailed comments on the two alignments. They've not identified any issues with either of the options, nor have they come out with a preference on either of the alignments. Metrolinx does go through an annual reprioritization of their frequent rapid transit network, and that's tied to the regional transportation plan. When they started that for 2023, the LRT extension had popped up into the top priority for their projects. It is one of the key inputs on how Metrolinx and the province by extension prioritizes and dedicates money and resources towards transit projects in the GTHA, so being in that high category is a very good thing. Metrolinx did note that the prioritization was based, the costing was based on the surface alignment, and that if there was an increase in cost for the tunnel alignment, it could affect the prioritization, but they didn't specify how, and to date it remains in that high category. We also continue to stress to Metrolinx that while this is entitled, the project is entitled the LRT extension study, it's actually the completion of the Hazel-McCallion line. And they need to look at that differently and compare it differently to other projects. And I'm going to speak to a little bit more on that later. Next slide, please. So over the past 2.5 years, there has been extensive engagement with various federal and provincial officials on the project, and we've included a full list of that engagement as an attachment to the report. Notably, 2 years ago, roughly, we did some targeted advocacy at the federal level, and at that time, the Minister of Infrastructure, Omar Alghabra, stated publicly that the federal government was willing to invest in the LRT tunnel alignment through downtown Brampton, and that they needed the province then to come to the table. Over the past 6 months, the advocacy efforts have continued through both the FCM and AMO conferences, as well as we've had separate meetings with the Federal Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, high-level Ministry of Transportation staff. We've met with staff from the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister himself, all advocating for Brampton's needs, and specifically with the LRT tunnel alignment. With all of this advocacy, both the federal and provincial governments are well aware of what our needs are, and they know that where our priorities are. One of the key messages coming back is that to staff is that they need funding programs in place in order to advance some of these projects going forward, and that without those infrastructure programs, then they're unable to deliver a program like this. Next slide, please. So over the last several months, there's actually been movement on from both the federal and the provincial side on that. In the spring of last year, the federal government announced details on the next generation of federal infrastructure funding, known as the Permanent Transit Fund. They've been doing a lot of consultation with stakeholders throughout the latter part of 2023, and we understand that the details of the fund will be released in the first part of this year. The Ontario government also recently announced that it will be creating a new Ontario Infrastructure Bank to help fund large-scale infrastructure projects, which would include transit projects. While not a dedicated transit funding program per se, this will be a new tool that would attract investors to help finance and build this type of infrastructure. So with the imminent launch of these two programs, we feel the time is right to advance one of the alignments through the TPAP process. This will help ensure that the LRT project will be shovel-ready when these new infrastructure funding mechanisms come online. It will also help to make sure we're at the front of the line, and we have to remember that we're going to be competing with other municipalities, other entities for those infrastructure dollars. So if we have this project ready, done, we can be at the front of the queue. Next slide, please. One of the other important pieces that's emerged while the team has been working on this study is the housing crisis and the plans for increased intensification of housing in downtown Brampton. We know that after housing, transportation is the second highest expense for most households. So there is a direct link between affordable housing and affordable transportation, and an ever-increasing dependency between the two. We know that the city is now planning to substantially increase the number of housing units in downtown, so building the LRT is even more critical now. And with the increased number of people in downtown, this also means that more people will be riding the LRT. That means the business case to support the LRT is going to be stronger as well. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the two alignments that we have currently brought forward through to the 30% design. As we've mentioned in previous reports, both the surface and the tunnel options are technically feasible, and each come with their own distinct benefits and costs. Next slide, please. The development of 30% design identified a number of issues for the surface alignment and key design considerations. Some of them did increase the capital cost of the project, but some of them also carry forward into the operational phase. That includes some increased travel times for both automobiles and the LRT, a notable gap in the cycling network, and then there are certain risks around the operations and maintenance, particularly in the downtown, because we get into that constrained area. There's not a whole lot of room. The LRT is going to be in mixed traffic. It's one lane of traffic going north, one lane coming south, the LRT and autos in that. Any kind of incident that happens can affect the service. You know, you could get even an LRV that's stuck in that traffic jam. The other piece here is how the line would be extended into the downtown. It's quite challenging given how the stop would come in and connect to the GO station, and to continue it north, there are some unique challenges in extending that further north. Next slide, please. So through the 30% design, there were also three major design considerations for the underground option, but they were all addressed through the design, and largely they impacted that costing of of the project. None of them were carried through to the operational phases, and that's partially what drove that cost increase up to the current estimate of $2.8 billion. So some people can look at that and say, you know, that's a lot of money, but there are a couple of important points to consider when we're looking at that cost. First, as I mentioned earlier, this is not just, you know, an extension of the line, it's actually the completion of the line. We've been studying this for more than 15 years. It was always intended to connect Port Credit into downtown Brampton. And, you know, this last piece of the line, you know, there's reasons why it wasn't completed, because it's challenging to deliver. And sometimes in order to address those challenges, it's going to cost money in order to deliver that project. The other piece to consider is that if you look at the cost from the existing construction of the Hazel McCallion LRT, and you add the cost of this extension, it totals about $4.9 billion. If you compare that on a cost per kilometer basis, we're right in line with other LRT projects that are being constructed throughout the GTHA. We're actually cheaper than what's being constructed in Hamilton. And that's something that we're also going to be connecting with Metrolinx on to make sure that they understand that. Next slide, please. This brings us to the funding. And projects of this nature that are constructed in the GTHA are largely 100% funded by the provincial and federal governments. And you've seen this chart before. This has been included in some of the other reports, just been updated recently. And it compares what the City of Brampton is asking for higher order transit, both the LRT extension and the Queen Street BRT, to some of the higher order transit projects in the City of Toronto and the City of Hamilton. And on a funding per capita basis, we're about a third of what the City of Toronto is receiving. We're less than what the City of Hamilton is receiving. But then when you compare that to the ridership growth and the demand for transit in Brampton, there is no comparison between the two. You can see we grew by 160% in the 10 years leading up to the pandemic, compared to 12% and 3% for the City of Toronto and City of Hamilton. Coming out of the pandemic, we've just carried on where we left off, 30% higher than 2019 numbers, and we still have the City of Toronto well below pre-pandemic levels, with the City of Hamilton just below their pre-pandemic levels. You know, we can clearly demonstrate to the federal and provincial governments that if they want to invest their transit infrastructure dollars, it should be in Brampton, and we can make a strong case for why that should be. Next slide, please. So this brings us back to the alignment that staff are recommending to move into the TPAP process, which is the tunnel alignment. It provides for significant travel time savings for both autos and people. So it's about 40% faster than our current Zoom service that operates through the corridor. It is also 3.5 times faster auto trips traveling north in the PM peak. With the tunnel alignment, those trips are going to be 3.5 times faster than what they are for a surface alignment. Getting into the downtown northbound with a surface alignment, getting into downtown in the PM peak is going to be very challenging in that environment. The tunnel is easier to extend north from a design and constructability perspective compared to the surface alignment. And this will be an important consideration because, as we know, we're going to see further intensification, further growth north of the downtown on Main Street. The tunnel alignment, again, it's a small thing but important. It allows for that active transportation infrastructure to be placed directly on Main Street. So no diversions, delivering an active transportation corridor straight through from Port Credit all the way into downtown Brampton. Peak ridership will also increase by at least 5%, and we know that that's going to be even higher with all the development that's being proposed and being planned for this segment of Main Street all the way from Steeles into the downtown Brampton. Next slide, please. So if council approves the recommendation in the staff report today, staff will start to prepare the required documents to begin the formal TPAP process. It's largely involves some stakeholder outreach, it will include a public open house, and it's followed by an expected approval by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Staff will continue to have discussions with Metrolinx on both the status of the project prioritization, plus how they continue to assess this project, because again, we think that we have a strong argument that they need to look at this differently. They need to look at the complete line that was originally and has always been planned for this project. We'll also stress to them that their ridership forecasting needs to be updated to reflect the explosive growth that's happening in Brampton, as well as all of the additional housing units that are going to be planned for this line. And then lastly, we'll also continue to work close with government relations and to continue to advocate at the federal and provincial level for that funding. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. I am not going to allow any questions right now from members. We're going to hold this and then move over to the delegations. Let the delegations come up, ask their questions. Delegations are more important than us. So we'll move to our first delegation, Jaypal Massey Singh, CEO of the Brampton Board of Trade, on item 12.2.1, light rail transit. Welcome, Jaypal.
Good morning. Morning, Your Worship, members of council. As shared, I'm Jaypal Massey Singh, and the newest hat I'm wearing now, appearing before council, I'm now the CEO of the Brampton Board of Trade. As you know, we're Brampton's only accredited business association, serving our members for over 135 years. Today, our members employ about 60,000 individuals here in Brampton, many of whom also raise their families in this community. As you're aware, the Brampton Board of Trade has a long history on this issue of the LRT. I myself came to council several times in my past role as chair of the board in 2014 and 2015 to advocate for the support of the LRT in Brampton. Over time, you've heard from many other directors of our board, our staff, and Board of Trade members on this critical transit project. Throughout the years, I believe we've been consistent in our message as it pertains to the LRT. The Brampton Board of Trade is in support of the completion of the LRT to the downtown GO station and is in support of whichever routing option will be built the soonest and will be responsibly funded. Further, the Brampton Board of Trade is in support of an overall network plan for Brampton in line with our desire to see solutions to the transit and transportation challenges to the prosperity of our city. This includes the Queen Street Highway 7 BRT between Brampton and Vaughan, which we understand will also reach the 30% design stage this summer. The Brampton Board of Trade is appreciative of the report and presentation brought forward by staff today and the commitment of the city to continue to allocate and invest resources on this important file. In particular, we're very pleased to see the analysis in support of the recommended tunnel option included consideration of the travel times and impacts to both vehicular and cycling traffic down the core, operational and maintenance costs, not just in the immediate but over time, and what option would best support further extension of the line into the northern areas of Brampton. Further, we're very happy to see that the review of the funding for transit infrastructure included an analysis of investments in Toronto and Hamilton, indicating that the investment in the recommended tunnel option is favorable from a per capita basis, but also a solid long-term investment when considering our growth in transit ridership relative to those communities. This is particularly salient in this current competitive environment for dollars. The Brampton Board of Trade encourages council to commence the TPAP process for the tunnel alignment, as well as the supporting recommendations as per the staff report, while considering the following to ensure success for the project. And that's the likelihood of funding. Although we appreciate the sound planning logic behind the recommended tunnel option, it's important that council also has confidence that our community can secure the resources for the $2.8 billion required for this project. As noted, Metrolinx has identified the LRT as a priority project, and the province has created transit fund and an infrastructure bank to support such initiatives. That said, we cannot take it for granted that the funds will be made available to Brampton, and advocacy will be necessary to ensure that we get our fair share. We cannot afford to miss out on this opportunity and must be sure that the desired route and the associated cost will be supported by those outside of Brampton as well. When the Board of Trade first supported the LRT in 2015, it was in large part because there was a clearly associated business case with modeling that showed the economic benefits to home and business owners along the route, as well as the LRT's projected impact as an investment attractor into our downtown. We believe this will continue to be a persuasive element in securing the support for the LRT and encourage that additional resources be allocated towards including such studies, as well as a comprehensive review of the costing that validates the estimates on ridership and takes into account inflation and other escalators on cost. In our latest business confidence survey, the members of the Board of Trade cited transportation infrastructure as the top issue facing Brampton, with 42% of respondents identifying it, up from 25% in 2022. In other words, we cannot risk further delay to the completion of the LRT. As such, we encourage you to move forward as per the staff report, but also request that you take into account that which will be required to secure support for successful funding and expedient completion. There is much work ahead of us, and we require your leadership. Once again, we appreciate the work done by city staff and look forward to next steps on this project. Thank you.
Thanks, J. Paul. I do have a question for you.
Of course.
Councillor Vincente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, J. Paul, for delegating today. And just one quick question.
Yeah, of course.
The Board of Trade is a very respected voice, not just here in the city of Brampton, but also with the province and the federal government. Can we count on the Board of Trade being very vocal with the MPs and the ministers and, the members of provincial parliament and the ministers, that as we are moving ahead on this next step, that it is the view of the business community here in the city of Brampton that they should move quickly to help us fund this project?
Absolutely. If the conversation is around expediency, Councillor Vicente, through the chair, if the conversation is around expediency or securing of funding for this project, you can count on the support of the Brampton Board of Trade. We look forward to working with staff and council around messaging. Obviously, it is in the details, and our membership has always been clear that we want responsibility, but speed and having this project completed is of vital importance to the prosperity of our community. So we are proud and happy to be a partner through these conversations.
Thank you very much, J. Paul, and looking forward to seeing the Board of Trade be as vocal as it can, with the resources that it has, of course, to get that message out to our provincial and federal partners.
Absolutely, and we'll be looking forward to convening such forums and conversations alongside you in order to make that happen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Vincente. Anybody else online like to ask questions? No, we're good. Thanks, J. Paul. Our next delegation, Chris Drew. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. It was great to see some of you at the levee with my parents on Sunday. I also want to bring greetings from Brampton's ambassador in Mattawa, Ontario, Kevin Montgomery. He says hello, and of course, Kevin and I worked very closely together almost 10 years ago in March of 2014. When there was public consultation on the previous LRT proposal, and our staff said this is an opportunity today to talk about the completion of that project. I also want to give a shout out to Councillor Keenan. I just want to thank him and city staff for fast action on removing a dead tree at John and Main Street. That was a public safety hazard. They got rid of that in about a week. I also want to thank Councillor Power for updating my parents. They're very excited for those new LED lights in the M section of Bramalea. And they love the energy efficiency. And thank you, Councillor Vicente, for coming to my dad's stained glass window tour of St. Paul's United Church across the street. I really want to thank staff for all of their time, hard work, taking all of their questions. I had the opportunity to attend a Brampton Board of Trade meeting this week where we asked lots of questions of staff, and they provided very thorough answers. And speaking of staff, I have with me a copy of the June 9th, 2015 staff report. Some of you will remember it because you were on council or you were in the audience for LRT. And it's a very comprehensive staff report, but there's a word missing in the staff report, and it's not the fault of staff. The word missing in this staff report is federal, as in the federal government. Because in 2015, the federal government put forward $0 for the LRT. Absolutely zero. And yet, that federal government, subsequent federal governments have gone on to fund transit projects in Quebec City, Montreal, Ottawa, Waterloo, Calgary, Edmonton, and the city of Vancouver. And of course, as you see in the staff report, Toronto, Hamilton, and York Region. So if you compare that to the 2024 staff report that I have in front of me, the federal government is mentioned multiple times, which I think is a really positive aspect, and I think just shows the progress on this file that we now see. I would also like to compliment staff that one of the appendices is a detailed, transparent listing of all of the meetings that staff and you as council have had with the federal and provincial governments. This not only meets what I see in other municipalities in terms of when they update the public in terms of advocacy for transit, I think in some ways it actually exceeds it. So thank you to staff for documenting all of the hard work that you are doing on the transit network plan for Brampton. It's really, really helpful. I just want to mention one other comparison to the 2015 staff report, that there's no mention of housing in that report. Whereas in the 2024 report, the staff report in front of you, there's a section on housing. It was mentioned in the staff presentation, and that's because transit is really good at helping the housing conversation. And you know, and you've been at announcements with ministers, that all political parties, federal and provincially, are talking about putting housing near transit. And that's great, and that's wonderful. But you still need to build the housing piece and fund the housing piece, both on the operations side, the local bus network, of BRT, LRT, and of course GO. It's not just good enough to say, let's put a lot of housing near transit without actually also investing in the transit piece. And Brampton Transit staff have done an excellent job of documenting the substantial growth of Brampton Transit ridership. I saw it today on the 511 as I was taking the bus here. Articulated bus, absolutely packed with Brampton residents trying to get through their day. Speaking of that, I was at the Minister of Finance's Brampton Board of Trade event. It was a great event that we had, and the Minister was asked about LRT by Jay Paul, and I'm going to paraphrase or directly quote some of his references. He mentions that he's known Mayor Brown for a very long time, and that Mayor Brown and Council are very passionate advocates for Brampton transit investment. The Minister of Finance, quote, says, if you can't move people, if you can't get your kids to school, if you can't have public transit, roads, subways, LRTs, if you can't get to work officially, you're not doing your job. We're building LRT on an unprecedented scale. The Minister of Finance further cited green bonds and the strong uptick for the province of Ontario on that. The Minister of Finance said that in just 90 days, 193,000 people came to Ontario. And he mentioned that if we're experiencing gridlock today, think of what that's going to be in the future if we don't invest in our transit system. Again, this is the Provincial Minister of Finance. So what the minister actually said is you can't stop building roads, you can't stop building LRTs, you can't stop building public transit. It takes a long time to do this stuff, and sometimes there's NIMBYism and bananas build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. And so the minister was basically saying we have to keep at it, we have to keep advocating. I think my time's up.
10 seconds to wrap up.
10 seconds to wrap up. Brampton, let's be ambitious. Let's build significant public transit that has dedicated space. History won't look poor on us if we build something great. History will look poor on us if we cut corners on transit. We can't be short-sighted. We have to keep at it and advocating, and I'm going to continue to do that as part of a networked plan.
Thanks, Chris. Stay right there. We have some questions. Councillor Tour.
Thank you, Chris, for that delegation. I'm just going to ask a polite question. Could you please briefly expand on your thoughts on transit in the city of Brampton in like a minute?
Well, one of the things that staff mentioned is that Metrolinx is working on an update to their regional transportation plan. So in essence, what the staff recommendation is to provide the province with additional information for a key transit project, in addition to the advocacy that's happening on the other key transit projects like the Queen BRT. So if you look at a comparison, the City of Toronto, for example, is spending tens of millions of dollars on further studying their waterfront LRT. They're spending millions of dollars to study their Eglinton East LRT. The province of Ontario has initiated a study on a Shepherd subway. So Brampton has to be in the game. Brampton has to compete with other municipalities who are aggressively pursuing their transit projects. The main LRT, as part of a networked plan, is one of those projects. So you have to keep at it. The city of Mississauga wants to spend $100 million to further complete the LRT, the loop. So Mississauga is not waiting. The city of Toronto is not waiting. Cambridge isn't waiting. The city of Ottawa isn't waiting. Many, many other cities across Canada are continuing to advocate, continuing to get more information, continuing to work with their provincial transit agencies. Brampton has to do the same. So through your leadership, you have the opportunity to do that today, including continuing to talk to ministers' offices, MPs, and MPPs, and I'll continue anything I can do to help.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Tour. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chris, for coming here and for your continued passion on this file. Can you, I know that you watch the transit and the transportation file very closely. When we talk about comparables, what additional information could you share with committee, say with respect to investments made on roads, like for example, you've been very vocal on the 413 and the investments that the province is looking to make on that project. How does that compare with this? And how do investments, say, in other regions compare with what we are asking for here in Brampton?
Well, it's a great question, Councillor, and I would just note that there are thousands, tens of thousands of daily Brampton Transit riders who want further investment in public transit. We have to get to the next level. We have to continue to invest. Transit without dedicated space in Brampton, throughout Brampton, is not going to be sufficient. I was at the levy and I was talking to a frontline Brampton Transit bus driver, very passionate about his job, and he says it's heartbreaking when he has to pass people because his bus is too full. So we have to continue to invest. Great bus driver, speaks so highly of so many bus drivers in Brampton. Just as a comparison, MTO was at Mississauga Council, I believe, this week, and was asked by Mississauga councillors if they could tell, if MTO could tell them what the actual budget is for the 413, and MTO couldn't. And I just raised that in the context of the level of detail, the approach, the professionalism that Brampton City staff are doing with this project in terms of the level of detail. They've got it to 30% design, they're getting more information. So sometimes it feels like public transit has to go through an extra level of scrutiny compared to roads and highways. And I just don't think that's fair. So I think there should be not only a fair share for Brampton, there should be a fair share for modes, public transit. Look at the 410, for example. People in Brampton and other places throughout the 90s, my lived experience, continued to advocate for the 410, expanding it, add more lanes, extend it. They didn't give up. We need that same kind of drive for public transit, for LRT and BRT in Brampton. We just simply cannot give up, because many of you are parents with children. I just don't want your children in Brampton to have the same lived experience I did, which was there was substantially nothing new built in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and look at our population growth. So the next generation of Brampton residents cannot afford that kind of delay, that kind of missed opportunity, where we basically only focus on one mode, and then we stick buses trapped in congestion behind single occupant vehicles. That's just not fair to transit riders. We need to continue to invest. So the answer to your question, Councillor, about comparing us to other modes, we have a very known budget for what the LRT will cost, a very detailed approach. You have the opportunity today to get a little bit more information. As J. Paul referenced, Metrolinx is working on the Queen Street Highway 7 bus rapid transit project as well. And so there's a lot of very solid information for this LRT compared to some other projects out there where the public doesn't have the complete picture on what that might cost. So my job, I think, is to advocate for public transit and to draw some of those important comparisons so that people are aware. And I'm not in any way trying to disparage people that are passionate for a particular project. I'm just trying to articulate that public transit also needs strong advocacy, but shouldn't be held to a double standard. That is not fair, but the good news is, again, through a very comprehensive staff report you have a lot of helpful information. Staff have done the comparables in terms of the per kilometer information, how it compares to other projects, and I would actually say that you could actually look at the Waterfront LRT, the Eglinton East LRT, and the Shepherd Subway in addition to the chart in the staff report in terms of comparables, although the funding hasn't been secured. And I think that the Brampton Transit Network Plan stacks up very favorably to other projects across Ontario and across Canada. So I know that's a long answer. I hope that helps answer your question.
Nobody answers it better. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Sutton. Mayor Brown, questions of the delegation?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for always being an encyclopedia of transit knowledge, and we're lucky to have your love for Brampton and love for Brampton transit. And one comment you made was, history will look poorly on cutting corners. I certainly agree with that. Toronto Transit System, 1954, they opened the subway in Toronto. And there was a lot of detractors at the time because they could have gone above ground a lot cheaper. It cost $67 million in 1954 to build 12 stops. $67 million. And for those who are saying we can't afford it, imagine what that would cost today in Toronto to go from downtown Toronto up to Eglinton. Let me ask you, you look at that hindsight of history. Obviously, that was a brilliant move by Toronto in 1954. and any modern city needs a modern transit system. What would Yonge Street be like today if they cut corners? If the subway was above ground on Yonge Street, which is already a traffic mess. You know, I don't like driving in Toronto just because it's so congested. Brampton's going to grow too. We got one of the fastest growth rates in the country, and so that same forward-looking vision they had in Toronto. What if they cut corners in Toronto back then? What would that have meant for the city of Toronto?
Would have been hugely problematic. You probably would have seen growth patterns similar to some US cities where they decided to spread out, which obviously is extremely more expensive in terms of roads, moving people, economic development, and efficiency. So that grid-based system that Toronto developed is very similar to the grid-based system that Brampton has developed and is working on developing. So it would be a huge missed opportunity to not develop. I think the last time I debuted, I'll repeat myself, you don't even have to go back as far as the 1950s. You can go back to 1990 when the portal for the Union Station streetcar was built, was not future-proofed. It's going to be very expensive for the waterfront LRT, unfortunately, to retrofit that. I'll give you a great example in Brampton in the 1990s or early 2000s when Queen Street was widened. Previous leadership did not future-proof it for dedicated BRT lanes. They had the right-of-way corridor there. They had more than enough space. They could have future-proofed that for Queen BRT, even within Brampton, even within my lifetime. So we can't miss these opportunities to invest. We have to keep advocating. We can't go another 30, 40 years without substantial investment. And the growth numbers of Brampton Transit and its population, and as the Minister of Finance have said, the hundreds of thousands of people who are coming to Brampton and the region each month, requires strong leadership and investment. So don't miss these opportunities. Continue to invest, and there's many great cities that have received substantial investment. You know, just as an example, I was recently in Vancouver. It was my wife's first time there, and we took the Millennium Line from the airport right into downtown Vancouver, and that project was completed a number of years ago, and Vancouver is continuing to build. Well, by comparison, look at Brampton Transit ridership's growth. I would also say, just for clarity on the fiscal side of it, you know, North American-wide, there's some conversations about how our transit capital costs, and it's not unique to Brampton, it's not unique to Ontario compared to Europe and other jurisdictions. That's in some ways a separate conversation. There's advocacy and work or things that in the procurement or the trades that potentially could be done to try to get our big transit projects maybe more comparable to Europe. It's not as easy as it might sound, and I just rely on the professional staff to handle that. And I would also note that, you know, this is 3.8 kilometers in terms of the corridor, and it's not 3.8 kilometers of tunnel. In the less complex space between Nanwood and Steeles, staff are proposing a surface LRT. So in some cases in transit projects in LRT, there are some complex pinch points. Waterfront LRT, Eglinton East LRT, Finch West LRT, Crosstown. Even the Hamilton LRT, it's not 100% surface. They have a pinch point where they have a railway crossing, and CPKC says you got to go under it because you can't interfere with our freight operations. So we can't paint all LRT projects with the simple brush and say, you know, it's binary, it's only 100% surface or 100% tunnel. The province is going to have the same exercise on Shepherd, where they're going to look segment by segment to what works best. It's the same thing happening on the Queen Street Highway 7 BRT. We'll get public information, hopefully soon. There'll be another PIC in the spring or in the summer, and they're going to take a segment by segment approach to see what works best. So that's essentially part of the information that's in the coming staff report or through the TPAP that you'll get. You'll get additional information that you can collaboratively work with the province, and that's comparable to what other municipalities are working on and lobbying the province for. So keep at it, Brampton. Support the staff recommendation in terms of getting more information, which will be public, and continue to advocate for the entire network plan. And I think if you continue to do that, we have a great chance for success. Sorry for the long answer.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Mayor Brown, you move receipt of the delegations. All in favor? There's no other questions? That carries. Before I bring the report, I quickly just want to jump over back to the consent. 12.3.1 I held by mistake. I didn't mean to do that. I meant for it to go into consent. So if there was staff here, if we could, happy to move that. All in favor? That carries. That was the Environment Committee meeting.
Through you,
Minutes.
Chair Palashi, we have a question from Councillor Keenan. He has his hand raised.
Okay. Councillor Keenan. Are you speaking to the 12.3.1?
No, sorry, Mr. Chair. I was putting my hand up when you were bringing back the report.
Okay, I do have a list. I'm going to go, the deputy mayor was first, and then I'll go to Councillor Keenan. So before us, members of committee, we have the light rail transit extension study advanced to the TPAP stage. Deputy Mayor Singh. We'll bring Doug Reeder back up.
Some of my questions were answered. I'm gonna stand up. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Keenan, you're up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I just really want to thank staff for the work put into this report. I know this is something that's been kind of a long time coming. And I also want to thank the delegations for, their support. We know as a council to advocate for something, it's united voices. So I'm very happy to see this. So as a local councillor, I was hoping that I could move the report and the recommendations within the report to go with phase 2 tunnel option. So that was the reason that I had my hand up, was just to make sure that I was able to move it. And again, I just want to thank everybody. And I know there's a lot of work ahead of us to make sure this can come to fruition. But at least we have the options that we're going with. And I look forward to advocating to other levels of government for the funding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Keenan. Are there any other members that would like to ask any questions? Mayor Brown.
No, a question, but a comment that I fully support Councillor Keenan's motion. I suggest that all the council second that motion. I believe there's a lot of momentum federally and provincially to look at phase 2 right now. Doug is right. This is the completion of the Hazel McCallion line. And, I was asked by a reporter a few months ago if I was concerned about delays with the Hazel McCallion line. And my response was, I'm more concerned about seeing this project complete, because right now it doesn't connect to our downtown. We want to see this done right. Hearing the delegates today, I thought there's some very eloquent words. Let's not cut corners on public transit. History will shine fondly on a city that understands we're going to grow, there's going to be intensification, there's going to be density, and I don't want our legacy in this council to have left a traffic nightmare in our downtown. This is less expensive, less ambitious than projects funded in almost every other comparable city. And so I think we've got a compelling argument. When I looked at those stats, I actually already shared it on social media, the stats that Doug put out on ridership and a per capita funding per resident, that is a compelling case for why this should be funded. And then you add in the additional element of housing. This is a dream project for the province and the feds to rally behind. So I hope we can all, make our concerted effort to lobby for this. And listen, if the province comes back or the feds come back and say, can it be 1.7 kilometer tunnel instead of 2 kilometer tunnel? Of course, I think we should be reasonable and adapt. But this is the project that we believe is best for the city. Let's not settle for a transit proposal for phase 2 that we don't believe is good enough for our city. Other cities have demanded what they felt was in the best interest of the city, and I feel very strongly that this is what we deserve as a city. I think fairness and ridership numbers make this decision a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I do have some questions, and so I'd like to move the chair be heard. Thank you. And I fully support this direction. I can't wait to one day travel on the Hazel McCallion LRT right into the downtown using the Mayor Brown Tunnel. I think that would be fantastic. If we could pull back up those stats, I only had one question around the money that Hamilton was provided. Was that then dollars, or is that calculated into what would be today's dollars? And if it would be today's dollars, what are we looking at?
Through the chair, so that funding was announced in the spring of 2021. So those are in 2021 dollars. We don't know what it is to date, but we can expect some type of significant inflationary pressures on that, given that, you know, the large part of the inflation we've seen is from the latter part of 2021 and into 2022, continuing into 2023.
Okay, sorry, can we go back to that? That $3.4 billion, the total cost of the project now. Has Hamilton or anybody been provided with any updates to what the cost of that project is going to be?
Through the chair, we have not received any update. We're not aware of any updated costs for that project as of now.
And do we know if Hamilton has received an update?
No, we do not.
Okay. And we're keeping an eye on that, right, obviously. At some point, is the potential for Hamilton to go back to the provincial and federal to increase their contribution?
Through the chair, I guess the short answer is we'll continue to monitor the status of that project. I know that they're continuing along with the design and the procurement phase, so I'm sure there'll be some numbers that will come out shortly, and then we'll be able to, we can update this chart or provide further information to council if
What is the status of Hamilton currently?
through the chair, so they are going through the procurement phase, so they're preparing the project piece to go out for procurement to get a vendor or consortium in to finish the design and then to build the LRT.
So we'll know very soon what the actual inflationary costs are on that project.
Through the chair, we're hopeful that we can find out that. Correct.
Okay. Those were really all my questions. 160%, 30% ridership increase, like that's massive. Like nobody does it better than Brampton. Nobody. So happy to support and be a part of the second. We have Councillor Keenan back on. Councillor Keenan.
Sorry, I just forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. Councillor Tour.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment for transit staff. So going through the report and having a discussion with Councillor Santos, who's the Vice Chair for Economic Development from Economic Development lens, I know we've mentioned a little bit about the jobs and what it means to the local economy in the city of Brampton. I wish we can expand more on that. Thanks to J. Paul, who came from the Brampton Board of Trade to bring that perspective. But if we can, in future transit reports, because transit enables jobs, it brings these jobs to the city. I'd like to see that be expanded a bit more in any of our future transit asks, because I know it enables housing and we always talk about housing, but I'd like to not miss the opportunity to also highlight the fact that this is one of those ways Brampton becomes an exciting place for people to come and invest. So if we can get those comments later down the road, would really appreciate that. And I think this is an appropriate time for us to be moving this, because we have a champion, a Brampton champion in Province Sarkaria, who's the Minister for Transportation right now. So this is very appropriate, and I'm very happy to see this going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Tour. It's been moved by Councillor Keenan, seconded by all members of council, but the secondary is not needed right now. We are missing some members, so hopefully we can get this to council, maybe re-vote on it at that time and recorded vote and stand in solidarity with all of us. But as of right now, it's been moved by Councillor Keenan. All in favor? That carries. I will go back to the delegation that we tried to get, if we have heard from the individual. Anything?
Through you, Chair Paleshi, we have not heard from the delegation.
Okay, and
Before we continue, can we receive the staff presentation, please? A motion?
yeah, my apologies. I
No
thought
problem.
that's what Councillor Keenan did.
Oh, okay.
Receiving the staff presentation
And the report?
and
Okay, perfect, thank you.
delegation's already been done, and that was voted on. The delegation again was, I can't see, Mr. Haniff, Realtor, purchase or lease of city property located at 52 Bramley Road. Has that individual happened to join us in chambers? Seeing none, not online that we know of. Okay, I will do nothing with that item then. Our next we'll move into government relations. Staff to update on government relations.
Thank you and good morning. And through the chair, we have a shorter presentation for you today with a couple items that catch us up and bring us up to date after the holiday season. And I'll begin with the regional updates. There's no regional council meeting scheduled for this week. The next regional council meeting will take place on Thursday, January 25th, 2024, and staff will prepare an update for members of council at that time. Next slide, please. Moving on to provincial matters, we do have a few announcements related to long-term care, including one made earlier this week regarding establishment of an investigations unit for long-term care. This $72.3 million initiative will focus on addressing major non-compliance issues such as abuse and neglect, and has potential to address some of the impacts on emergency room traffics across the hospital system. Next slide, please. On January 11th, the province announced $24 million over 3 years for the bail compliance and warrant apprehension grant program, which helps police services monitor high-risk individuals and prevent crime prevented by repeat and violent offenders on bail. 17 municipal police services, 4 First Nations police services, as well as 12 Ontario provincial police services will be benefiting from this program. Peel Regional Police, while Peel Regional Police was not included in that announcement, we did have an announcement yesterday through which the government has allocated $6 million over 3 years in crime prevention initiatives. This funding is being delivered through the Proceeds in Crime Frontline Policing Grant Program, which will focus on 23 projects, including Peel Regional Police, which will be receiving $300,000 to hire an education, training, and outreach coordinator to help develop community-based approach to countering hate and violent extremism. Next slide, please. To go back to long-term care, earlier in the new year, the government has also announced $15 million towards Local Priorities Fund to support long-term care residents with complex needs such as dementia or bariatric care requirements. Ministry of Long-Term Care is currently working with Ontario Health to review this year's proposals, and successful applications will begin to be awarded and receive their funding in coming weeks. Next slide, please. As a last update for the provincial, related to the provincial government, I also wanted to flag for you Greenbelt Status Law Amendment Act 2023, which has received royal assent on December 5th, 2023. That act reinstates 15 parcels of land to the Greenbelt and Oak Ridges Moraine, areas which have been previously removed in late 2022. It also revokes existing boundary regulations, restores prior land protections, and strengthens immunity provisions. Next slide, please. The last slide in today's presentation provides with an update about the delegation by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario to the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs. AMO highlighted a negative impact of current provincial municipal fiscal arrangements on the social and economic prosperity in Ontario. The association is requesting province or government to engage in a collaborative review of municipalities, focusing on detailed analysis of revenues, costs, financial risks, and the need for infrastructure investment to enable growth and service delivery in Ontario. And I will only mention that the social and economic prosperity review that AMO is undertaking, we expect that to obviously be a reoccurring theme throughout the year, and we're working very closely with AMO to ensure that municipal needs, including Brampton, from a fiscal perspective, are well articulated, and Brampton is a strong voice through these discussions. I would only conclude today's presentation by mentioning that the staff are finalizing city's formal submission to the province and federal government ahead of their anticipated 2024 budgets, and will be bringing that to the council in the near future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful, thank you, Andreas. Very well put together. Does any members have any questions? Anybody online? No? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Been moved by Councilor Vicente, receipt of the government relations update. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is, I think I'm switching chairs, but I'm going the wrong way. We're into community services now, correct?
Yep, through you, Chair, that's correct. The staff report was approved on consent, so the only remaining item is councillor question period.
Do any members have any questions on anything that relates to community services that was in the agenda? Seeing none. Legislative services. There is nothing.
Nope.
ECDEV, there is nothing. I'll take it to, sorry, legislative services, councillor question period. Any questions on legislative services? Seeing none. Public question period. Any members of public that would like to ask any questions of legislative services? Seeing none. ECDEV? Any members like to ask anything for ECDEV? Do you want me to pass it over to you to ask any members? Any public question period? Any members of public like to ask any questions? Seeing none. Corporate services. The activity report was in consent, all in consent. Right to question period. Any members have any questions on corporate services? Seeing none. Move it over to Public Works. You have items? Nope. There are no items under Public Works. Any questions on Public Works? Seeing none. Referred matters list was taken care of already.
Through you, Chair Kaleshi, there was a hold from yourself for referred matters.
I meant to put both of them into consent. My apologies. I'm happy to move that one too. All in favor? That carries. My apologies, everybody. Public question period. Is there any members of public who would like to ask any questions on anything that relates to the agenda today? Seeing none. Anybody online? There is no closed session. Our last item of business, item 16, is adjournment. It's been moved by Councillor Power that we adjourn today, and the committee meet again on Wednesday, January 31st, or at the call of the chair. All in favor? That carries. Have a great day, everybody.